ala Rasulillah. I am Dr. Nur Aliyu, privileged to be a participant of this conference, privileged to make my presentation before Sheikh Dr. Abubakar Mahmud Gumi, privileged to be in the midst of these beautiful faces. As the chairman said, my paper is Sheikh Abubakar Mahmud Gumi, an intellectual. What I have tried to do in the paper is to look or to prove that Sheikh Abubakar Mahmud Gumi was not just an ordinary Muslim scholar. What I mean by ordinary Muslim scholar is a scholar that only teaches and preaches and never became mindful of what the society was in need of. While in the case of Sheikh Abubakar Mahmud Gumi, he was a towering figure of Islamic scholarship. In fact, a person who brought a lasting change to the way Islam was being practiced, the way Islamic knowledge was being pursued, and the way Islamic knowledge was being practicalized in Nigeria, particularly northern Nigeria. Therefore, I considered him as an intellectual, someone who operated not based on the misconception of others who usually said, Inna wajadna alayhi aba'ana. Whatever we find is that how we inherited it. Therefore, it cannot be changed. It cannot be altered. While in his own case, whatever was not in tandem with the actual orthodox of Islam has to be changed. Consequently, he led an intellectual movement personally and influenced others to carry out that intellectual revolution or intellectual movement that changed traditionalism, religious and cultural traditionalism, also revived Sunnah, and also people came to imbibe and embrace knowledge based on correct understanding, based on the understanding of the foreigners in Islam. This is the main conception of the paper. So to do justice, I tried to clarify what an intellectual is, so that we see if really Sheikh Abubakar Mahmud Gumi was an intellectual. First of all, intellectual, the concept, according to Steve Fuller, he said is someone who makes a living out of production and distribution of ideas. A person who must be adept at communicating in a variety of media, not just academic texts, but through which but other means through which ideas may be conveyed. An intellectual is a person who engages in critical thinking, research, and reflection about the reality of the society in which he or she lives, and proposes solutions for its normative problems based on sophisticated ideals and ideas. He uses thinking, deep thinking, critical analysis, and reason to engage with complex issues and ideas, open to which based on which complex ideas open to understand and improve the society in which he lives. He is characterized, or an intellectual is characterized by intense curiosity, a love of learning and knowledge valuing, and critically examining social issues based on societal interests. In historical terms, around the Muslim world, there were people who acted in this case. And in our own climb, in Nigerian context, Sheikh Abubakar Gumi was that type of person. In fact, intellectuals are usually those who behaved in the manner the French philosophers operated. I mean the Voltaire, Montesquieu, and the rest. But I'm not equating them. I'm not making him to look like them. But the way they did, the method they did, in fact, was exactly how intellectuals usually operate. We all know how the French philosophers changed or looked at the French society. proposed the way it should be changed, and eventually it was changed. And the impact didn't just ended within the French society, but it reached all parts of the globe. In fact, it was what triggered the American Revolution. The French philosophers, the impact of the French philosophers was what triggered the American Revolution. In our own case, Sheikh Abubakar Gumi, his impact as an intellectual went beyond just northern Nigeria, but even all our neighboring countries here have subscribed to the teachings he had taught. In the paper, there is a segment for his origin and life, but let me skip it because of time. Let me quickly go to the factors that shaped his character as an intellectual. There were certain factors that actually shaped this personality into an intellectual. First of all, his family background. We all know from his autobiography how he mentioned that the way, since he was a young boy, he aspired to inherit his father, the way of his father. And that's how, in fact, it was what even shaped his decision to avoid the Barewa College for Kano Law School, because it was there he understood that he could pursue real Islamic education, which he wanted. Secondly, the Maru incidents. We all know that, as yesterday Sheikh Said Galadanchi mentioned, the way the incidents in Maru changed him. In fact, Abubakar Gumi himself mentioned it. Let me quickly say it. He said, the outcome of the case, that is at Maru, deeply affected me afterwards. In matters, page 9. He said the outcome of the case, that is the issues that, the incidences at Maru, the two incidents at Maru, affected me afterwards in matters of truth. From then, one should never fear to speak out. On this basis, I had understood the first decisive conflict in my career, and I was not yet 26. Yes, Maru had left me a changed person. The second factor, or the third factor, was the Kano Law School. In fact, the learning tradition which Kano Law School came to plant in northern Nigeria is unprecedented. In fact, all those who attended that school, you find them changed persons in their own localities. 3 minutes? Subhanallah. Sheikh Gumi himself mentioned how the school changed him from the last paragraph of the page 9 and to abundant people. You can read it. The next, his qualities. We know his qualities were mentioned, made him to even force him to become a person that must look for change to what was happening in the society. Another thing was the canonization of Sufi sheikhs. What I mean by this is the Sufi environment in page 10. What I mean by canonization of the Sufi is that in northern Nigerian society by then, people were made to understand that they can't do without sheikh or following one tariqah or the other. While Sheikh Gumi, when he came, in fact, the teachings he brought, in fact, made him, what he found in the society, in fact, made him to even become more intellectual, someone that must bring change to the society due to what was prevalent in the society. Another thing was the Sultanbella Mosque, because it gave him platform. The next thing is page 11. That one is page 11, the Sultanbella Mosque. The next thing is the use of the media, the Kaduna radio, the NTA, and the publications he used to do weekly in Gaskiya Tafi Kobo. In fact, by then, Sheikh Gumi, he had moved from his formative period as an intellectual into another stage next in his life. The last aspect, I think, in this is his exposure with intellectual from other religious climes around the globe. His ideas, I have summarized them. First, in fact, he preached that the authority to institutionalize a religious act is only Allah and His Prophet. This is one of his core of his ideas. Secondly, simplification of justice and making it accessible to all. In fact, this is one of the characters of intellectual. They preached for social justice, and that's what Abubakar Gumi stood for. In fact, especially when he became Deputy Grand Kadi and Grand Kadi. Number three, he was a strong opponent of traditional Quranic schools, because by then criticisms, even by the colonial masters, against the way the Quranic schools were at those days. In fact, he joined them to see how they could be changed. That's why he himself pioneered establishment of reforming Islamic schools in Nigeria. The next thing was his ideas is anti-Sufism, taqlid, and local customs. In fact, Sheikh Gumi categorically went against taqlid, blind imitations. He challenged that, and traditionalism. He promoted education because he believed that unless people study, they can't things that came from the West that could help Islam go forward and the Muslim society. This is just what I mean by Islamic modernity, because the world was changing and we, the Muslims in northern Nigeria, were far behind. Therefore, we have to embrace what the modernity brought. And lastly, demystification of the Quran. This one is the last one, sir. This one is the last. Demystification of the Quran and simplifying religious teachings. One of the major ideas of Sheikh Abubakar Mahmud Gumi was that the Quran was meant to be one in kundi that not everybody can touch. Even the scholars, when they were teaching, as they come across a verse of the Quran, they will say, bakin linzami ya fi karfin kaza sai a wuce, sai aka mai da shi wani kundi no, it's for all, it's for the humanity. Therefore, it has to be made understood to the people. That's why he embarked on translating it into native language, so that the people will know what they are reading. And he started with the first two chapters from the ground, the Amma and the Tabara, because he believed that it was what people usually read when they are praying, so that they know the content of what they read in prayers. Thank you very much.
So now we are going to go to Kallabi, and we have our sister, a PhD candidate. Please let me have the mic. A PhD candidate from Department of Islamic Studies and Sharia here in Bio University, Kano. She's going to present on a topic of Sheikh Gumi and the reform of women's rights in Islam, a jurisprudential analysis. She's coming from the perspective of Allah. She's going to analyze it jurisprudentially from Usul al-Fiqh perspective, I believe. And Hawa is making research in this area. So Hawa, you can come to the podium and you have 10 minutes to speak to your paper, please.